Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by Synergy Performance. Our mission with this podcast is to explore the topics of growth, performance, and personal development through conversations with individuals pursuing success and by using current events in business and sports to discuss strategies on how you can grow into the individual that you want to be.
Okay, welcome back to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by Synergy Performance. I'm Drew Brannon here with Cory Shaffer today, and as always, really thankful that you've taken some time to spend with us. Just to kind of take us back to last time, we are in the month of April focusing on managing distractions and achieving focus, which we know are two pretty difficult things to do these days. We spent our last episode talking about just some current things we've seen, the way technology has impacted our ability to focus. So if you did not get a chance to listen to that, I highly recommend you do that. It's something that's really applicable regardless of where you are in life or what you find yourself doing professionally these days. We know that the impact that technology, particularly cell phones, can have. And today we're turning our attention to the topic of finding focus while under pressure. And so, Cory, as we kind of jump into this, let's from the very beginning do our best to define what that is, right? And so when we start talking about this word pressure, it's a word everyone's heard of, everyone's experienced it before. What are we really talking about?
To me, to just keep a really, really simple definition, what came to mind when I was thinking about how to define that was just there's something at stake. Typically, if we're talking about performance, like my performance is going to result in something blank, right? Like win or a loss, good or bad, right?
Yeah.
There's something here that's at stake. How would you define it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly something is at stake is a fair way to do that. And then I think additionally I would just add it's when something meaningful and significant is either happening or is about to happen. And let's also just remind everybody. I mean, I know that when we think about who's listening to this podcast, we have business professionals, we have athletes, we have coaches, we have a whole parent. I mean, there's a whole slew of people. Everybody experiences pressure, and that's why I think words like something's at stake or a matter of significance, it's a meaningful moment. That's really what we mean. This isn't just about, there's a second left on the clock and I've got to make some it's not just about like pressure in a sports context. It's anything that's driving pressure in our life.
Yeah, it's very I described it before as like it's context dependent, right? Like it's from context to context, pressure is going to be very different. The pressure that you might feel in the middle of a game versus in a boardroom, you know what I mean? Like for that athlete, there's a lot of pressure maybe on game day. For them to walk into a boardroom, there might not be a whole lot of pressure, right? Sure. Because there's not the same significance. It's not the same meaning. Yeah. Right?
And I think there's also, we don't talk about this one as much, but there's also what I call chronic pressure. And, where do I hear that most is with parents. I think there's so many parents that feel this recurring and chronic pressure to raise kids that stay out of trouble, that get educated, that go on and, go to a college that will allow them to be trained for life. Like all that stuff, they just feel this recurring theme of pressure to deliver on things they frankly can't control. And so I think that's then we're not going to go there quite as much today, but we get into that whole idea of the relationship between the pressure we feel and the things we really can control versus what we can't. Okay, so that's what it is. Let's also do our best to understand what are the things that go on inside of us when we experience pressure.
Yeah, so to me, this conversation has to start with your perception and your attitude towards pressure.
Yeah.
There's a boatload of research that shows your thoughts, right? How you view stress, how you view pressure literally impacts not just mentally, but even physiologically, how you experience stress.
Yeah.
So
meaning when we say perception, we're talking about like how I'm making sense of this, what it means to me, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah. So what does this mean? Am I viewing pressure, like the New Zealand All Blacks, just as an example, they talk about how they view pressure as a privilege.
Yeah.
Right? Like they want to embrace it. They've earned the right to feel pressure when they play.
Which is a Billie Jean. I want to just give Billie Jean her credit there because that's a phrase. Like I've heard that misattributed a bunch. The All Blacks have talked about that a ton.
Yeah.
I think Billie Jean King was the first person to really coin that phrase, and there's a reason why people have adopted it. It's spot on.
Right. So do I want to view pressure? Do I want to view this situation as a challenge or as an opportunity? Can I normalize it for myself? Can I remind myself in that moment that like, hey, what I'm feeling right now is normal, and in fact, good in a lot of ways, right? Do I want to interpret some of what I'm feeling as a positive thing that's preparing me for what I'm about to do? Or am I going to view this feeling or this situation as it's somehow threatening?
Yep, that's
right?
the word.
Exactly, right? So as soon as I experience it as being threatening, I literally set this, what I call like this stress process into motion, right? So stress kind of, or, that pressure, it's going to act on us in two ways, and it's going to change what's going on in our minds cognitively, right? So some attentional changes, and it's also going to act on us physiologically. So attentionally, what happens there is, I think every athlete I've ever talked to, when I run this by them, they're like, yep, is we tend to get very internal with our thoughts, right? So a little bit less external, a little bit less focused on the task, and a little bit more focused on us and how we feel in that situation. And then we get negative.
Right.
So that combination now I'm starting to ask myself questions. Now I'm filling myself with doubt, right?
Yeah, because threat is bad.
Yep.
I mean, like our attachment to the word threat or anything threatening is get out of there quick.
Yep.
Like we want to flee. We fear for safety. We kind of decompensate, and that's what you're talking about right now. Attentionally, one way we decompensate is we go more internal in negative ways.
Yep.
We lose perspective and connection with the things outside of us.
Exactly. So the physiological piece then, that's your fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're wired the same way we were thousands and thousands of years ago. And once upon a time, that was a really beneficial thing because it actually prevented us from real danger. The problem is when you're shooting a free throw with a couple seconds left on the clock, there's no real inherent danger, but our brain interprets it in the same way. And so physiologically, we have that same response as your fight or flight response. So our heart rate's going to go through the roof, our blood pressure goes up, our respiration goes up. Some people feel nauseous or queasy, right?
Yeah.
The butterflies that you might feel, muscle tension or shaking. I mean, everybody has kind of a little bit of a different response, but most people are checking some of those boxes.
Yeah. And let's face it, nothing you just said what I consider to be optimal for performance.
Well, exactly. And then if you really think about what happens in those moments, a lot of the time, those two things, so attentionally what's happening, right? I'm getting internal and I'm getting negative, and physiologically I feel all this stuff changing and happening inside my body. They start to play off of each other.
Yeah,
it becomes a really vicious cycle where maybe it starts off with like, oh man, the game's on the line, right? Can I do this? What if I miss, right? So that internal negative self-talk starts, and then before you know it, you feel that heart. And you recognize the heart and you go, oh boy, right? Now I can feel my heart rate. Like that must mean I'm not ready for it, and it just spirals on you. So those things, like you said, aren't exactly creating an environment for optimal performance. So that's what leads to rushing a lot of the time in those situations. Just an inability to attend to task relevant cues even.
Yeah.
We speed up. I mean, a number of different things happen, and that's what leads to, deficits in performance.
Yeah. And I'm glad you started with this because perception is king here. Let's think about what we're talking about today, focusing under pressure. You just gave a really good example of when perception is off, the chaos that is created.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and what's the hardest time to focus? When do we get in our own way the most? When we allow chaos to be created in our mind and our body. And so what's interesting, I know we've both seen this with so many people, once that chaos loop has really been set into motion, it's hard to come back. And then additionally, people often think that the skill they need to be better at is improving the management of the chaos, when in reality it's less about that. Like, that's a skill, it's all great for us to have.
It's a piece of it, yeah.
But like, let's go back to what started the whole thing. The skill we need to improve in is our ability to perceive better.
Yes.
To make sense of it better, to stop the loop before it's begun.
Right. And I almost hit, a lot of the time I feel like I hit a stopping point with some of the clients, the athletes that I work with there, because it's almost like they're looking for more.
Yeah.
I'm like,
right.
This is really you just making a choice, right? A commitment to changing the way that you view the world, really.
Yep.
Right? Like, sometimes some of our work is just a big picture perspective shift. And if you're not willing to make that because you're looking for something else, like, it's really hard to get to the other stuff. You know what I mean?
And it is easier said than done.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I hear that so often, regardless of industry or context, whatever. Well, that sure is easier said than done. It absolutely is.
Right.
But exactly. So if it was easy, everyone would do it. Here's your opportunity to differentiate yourself from others who either can't or aren't willing.
Right. So this is very much aligned or down the path of, like, simple but not easy.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. Like, the idea of, like, okay, I just need to change how I think about pressure. I need to change how I think about stress. Like, okay, got it. What else you got for me? It's like, hang on. Like, this is going to take some work, right? Like, this is I described it as a commitment, and that's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm. And we've both used that word skill, which is absolutely the one we've got to use here. What do we know about skills? They take time to develop.
Right.
They're not, and we differentiate their ideas from skills. Ideas inform skills, but so often I think people want to be able to become familiar with an idea or gravitate toward an idea and be changed as a result of it. Doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. The idea might be your impetus for change, but then you've got to do the work. You've got to develop the skill.
Right.
All right, so we've defined what pressure is. We've talked about what goes on inside of human beings when they experience pressure. Now we're going to discuss kind of our three ideas or our three focal points for how you find focus while under pressure. All right, so those are, and we'll kind of spell these out clearly: preparation, and then the ability to quiet the mind, and lastly, quiet the body. So our 3 points for today are preparation, quiet the mind, quiet the body. Let's begin with preparation. Cory, the people that you work with on developing focus skills, tell us a little bit about where you like to start the conversation as it relates to preparation.
So again, the context here that I'm most used to talking is, high school athletes, college athletes. So the simplest way for me to describe or relate to them about this topic is school, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so using school as a metaphor, I just asked, like, what's it like to sit down? I said, you've been there, I've been there. What's it like to sit down and take an exam, to take a test that you didn't prepare for? Right? And they'll describe it.
They'll probably start laughing because
they'll laugh because everybody's been there. You know what I mean? And they can actually absolutely relate to that. And they just describe how it's like, it's hard to be confident in anything you're doing. Right? You do kind of feel
you question everything.
Exactly. You question everything. Like, you're full of doubt. You're full of worry. In other words, like, obviously you want a good grade, but you haven't done the work to support it.
Yeah.
And so you're left just questioning.
Hope is
everything.
A terrible strategy.
It really is, right? And so using that as an example, but then saying, okay, what's it like then when you prepare really well for a test and you sit down, and even though you don't know what's going to be on it, how is it different? It's like, well, I just feel prepared, right? I can actually feel confident in knowing, like, I did everything that I could do. So whatever's coming at me, I really believe that I can handle it. Mm-hmm. Right? So to me, that's the simplest way to start that conversation of getting them to realize, like, you already do this.
Yeah.
At least most people.
We hope you do.
Yeah, we hope you do. You're already doing this in some capacity, right? Now let's talk about how maybe we can change your preparation in your sport.
Right.
To better prepare you for that moment, so to speak.
And any form of performance, we've said this on this podcast many times. Let's be very clear on what our goal is as people who are in performance context, and that is, let's put ourselves in a position to be successful. Let's give ourselves the best shot we can possibly have to succeed, to achieve, because we can't control that, of course. We don't control outcomes. This is one of the best things you can do to give yourself a chance to be successful. Just prepare.
Right.
That's on you. you have the direct ability to make conscious decisions about what goes into you becoming ready for something.
Right. And then the way that I described it, I think clicks pretty well with a lot of people is now your performance or your test or your exam or whatever it is that we're talking about is really just feedback for your preparation.
Yeah, right.
Right?
To help us know.
If you think, hey, I studied, I did everything I could, and you get a C, well, it informs you that maybe you need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
If you feel like you prepared the best of your ability and let's say you have a string of games where you're just not quite performing the way that you want to, well, I would start taking a look back at that preparation and seeing, hey, what can I do differently, right?
Yeah, and let me introduce one more idea into this preparation discussion, and that's the term that I use called baseline. And when we say baseline, all I mean by that is, here's how I'm walking into the moment. Here's what I'm bringing to the equation as far as the moment goes. And so baseline typically for me includes both how I feel and how I'm thinking. If you're an athlete, if you're a coach, if you're a business, it doesn't matter what you are, you want to be able to walk into as many moments as possible with a healthy baseline. You don't stand a chance at doing that if you don't know in your mind in an honest, truthful way that you've prepared adequately. Mm-hmm. And here's how this really gets in the way is I'm gonna walk into this moment with a series of feelings and thoughts that will basically align to construct my baseline. And if I know that my preparation has been poor, I'm shaky to begin with.
Right.
Like before we've even started, I'm already questioning myself. Right? I'm already trying to kind of maybe, cram in whether it's information or if we're talking about sports, like last minute strategy or fitness or whatever it is. And I already know in my head I'm behind. Mm-hmm. Position of weakness. And, we put ourselves at such a deficit in performance when our baseline is off. We got to give ourselves a chance.
Absolutely.
So, okay, as we were talking but prior to today, you brought up a really good example, I think, on preparation. Why don't you talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so recently I watched a documentary that a lot of people have watched recently called Free Solo by a guy named Alex Honnold who climbs. And if you don't know what free soloing is, it's like rock climbing but without any gear, no equipment, no ropes, nothing.
It's really the only way I climb for the record.
Yeah, right. So imagine wherever you are right now, sitting at home or sitting in your car listening to this, basically just going out. And this guy climbed a mountain called El Capitan, which is in Yosemite Valley out in California, over 3,000 feet tall. Just basically a vertical rock face that he climbed as you're sitting there right now, right? So the documentary is great. I would highly recommend watching it. There's a lot of insight that I, can gain from just watching that and hearing how this guy prepared for it, mentally, not just physically. So it's pretty cool. But
I just want to note that this does qualify as pressure. What you
I would go ahead and say yes, it qualifies as pressure. For an even more condensed version, what you can do is type in Alex Honnold TED Talk into YouTube, and he does a great job of really condensing that experience down to about 12 minutes. And in that TED Talk specifically, he describes one of his first free solo climbs compared to that of El Cap, okay? For this first free solo climb, he didn't prepare. 2 days before he did the actual climb, he went out for the first time with a rope, right, and with some equipment, and climbed the mountain or whatever, and just tried to get a general sense of what he wanted to do, okay? He spent 1 day basically preparing, with literally his life at stake.
Yeah, that would not qualify as adequate preparation.
That is not good preparation. So again, he describes though how when that moment came, he completely diverted from like the route that he created, you know what I mean, mm-hmm. during his quote unquote preparation. He was more or less just winging it.
Yeah.
Right? But then he got to specific points in that climb, and again, because he hadn't prepared, he was not confident at all. Like he talks about these moments in that TED Talk and how what's running through his mind was panic. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I know what I need to do, but because I haven't done it enough, I can't trust it. Mm-hmm. Right. And he said, like, I kind of lost my composure, Now, obviously he was successful.
Yeah, he wouldn't be here.
He lived, right? But the way that he described that I thought was so great, because he basically said, I succeeded, but I felt very unfulfilled. Uh-huh. And the reason was I knew how lucky I was to get out of there, quote unquote, successfully, right? And he said, kind of his mindset shifted towards El Cap, it was, I don't want to be a lucky climber, I want to be a great climber. So how different his preparation was for El Cap, which no person had ever done, was just incredible.
Yeah.
So he taught, years and years of preparation went into this, even down to, and this is something I wanted to comment on, he didn't just rehearse and prepare for every movement of the climb, which was thousands of tiny little arm and hand and foot movements. He also prepared for the emotional piece of it, right?
Yeah,
so he
really
talked
good.
about how important visualization was for him in prepping for that. So obviously he did plenty of reps on the mountain with equipment, but then he also would try to visualize the emotional impact of some of those moments. He wanted to be prepared for that, right? So it's one thing to visualize myself shooting free throws in an empty gym. It's another thing to visualize myself shooting free throws in a packed house with a national championship on the line, which I know is something that you wanted to talk a little bit about here recently.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I want to mention this too, though. I've never heard a person say, I wish I wouldn't have prepared so much for this moment. Yeah, but when you talk about the Alex example, that's one of the thoughts that I get is just the regret that so often pervades moments of pressure.
Right.
Where, the first climb you described, obviously he's very fortunate that worked out the way it did, but the fact is there are many people who move into pressure-filled moments who didn't prepare well, who crumble.
Right.
And it doesn't go their way.
Right.
And the stakes aren't as high as life or death, fortunately. But whether it's the sales pitch that you're trying to make or the game that you're trying to win, you don't get the deal. You lose the game. And part of the reason for that is you lacked focus in the big moment.
Right.
And why did you lack focus? You weren't prepared.
Right. And he even goes on to describe then, like, when he actually did El Cap, and it was actually his second attempt. He started it one day and got 500 feet up, 1,000 feet up, and was just kind of like, today's not the day.
Yeah,
right?
I remember reading about that.
But the day that he did it, he literally described it as he was as comfortable as taking a walk in the park, which is absolutely
hard to believe.
Right. It's so hard to believe, right? It's really difficult to wrap your mind around, but that's what the preparation really afforded him, right? Was he could be comfortable in that moment then.
But it's all about what you're saying there how is he able to feel such a sense of calmness in such a high pressure environment? His trust is so great in his preparation.
Exactly. Like he did, again, he in his mind, he had gone through that specific course, so to speak, that he took that route and did each one of those movements thousands of times.
Right. And I think maybe a final thing to say on that before we transition, the repetition that's involved in preparation drives focus. Like, it's so much easier to focus on things we've done before.
Yes.
There's a strong neural pathway associated with that where we're repeating it, and focus because it's automatic.
Right.
Like, focus is optimized when we're thinking and kind of resorting to automatic habits.
And some of what we're talking about here, just a little aside, is almost aligned with confidence, right? And to me, confidence is the two big variables involved there are going to be preparation and self-talk.
Yeah.
Right? You really do need both. You can't just show up and talk your way through something you've never done before. I'm sorry, that's not a good strategy. But you can't just prepare and then show up and not support yourself, so to speak, with the proper kind of self-talk either.
Sure. No,
right? Like that's what test anxiety is, right? I've prepared, I've studied, but then I get into the moment and now I'm doubting and questioning everything that I do, right?
Okay, so let's switch gears from preparation and jump into talking about the importance of quieting the mind. And you kind of brought this story up as we were finishing up that last section. And that is Kyle Guy for Virginia in the semifinals game against Auburn last weekend. Just an unbelievable moment. And so for some of the people who might not have seen that game, I believe there were either 0.6 or 0.8 seconds left on the clock after he'd been fouled shooting a three-pointer. And this is I played college basketball. These I did not play in that championship
big
game,
time.
In case you're wondering,
right.
But these are the kind of moments that you really do kind of rehearse in your driveway when you say, okay, down by 2 so they're down by 2, 0.6 seconds on the clock. He's fouled shooting a three-pointer. He's going to the line. Of course, he gets 3 free throws with an opportunity to kind of cement. He's going to cement himself in history one way or the other. most likely. But of course, that can go both ways. And so let's think about the magnitude of that moment. And everybody's watching. Virginia, of course, greatly underachieved the prior year when, for the first time ever, a 16 seed beat the 1 seed. And they were not just the 1 seed, but the overall number 1 seed in the tournament. And they didn't just lose, they lost by 20. And so there was there's a lot been written about that. Great article on Sports Illustrated this week about the redemption of that. But so that's the moment.
So I would say there's something at stake.
There is definitely something at stake, something hugely important at stake. And so let's begin by, and I think we should really leverage, Cory, honestly, our experiences as athletes and just years and years of working with athletes in that moment. Where would you imagine his mind either went or was tempted to go prior to the moment?
To the outcome.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's the easiest place to go, and to start playing the what if game.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Like what if I miss, right? Or I don't think it really tends to go to what if I make it, to be honest. I think it's more likely to go to what if I miss, right? Yeah. What are the repercussions going to be of that?
Threat.
Exactly. Again, and that starts that process. That's what I think to be true.
Yeah, and so let's acknowledge, all of what you're describing there becomes highly disruptive to optimal focus. Mm-hmm. Because here's the other thing that we tend to do is once we begin to kind of contemplate and consider these negative thought processes like you're referring to there, then we begin to attach kind of emotional meaning to them as well, and can get into a whole kind of a dark place of discouragement, and it can get really bad really quickly. And then the other angle there is, I think we make that really, really big.
Right.
Everything gets weighty and burdensome and big.
Well, and if you look at it kind of like, well, your thoughts are going to impact how you feel, right? Thoughts are going to impact emotion. Emotion is going to influence behavior.
Yeah.
Then again, if I'm making this out to be something way bigger than it is, the reality is that you're shooting free throws, and he's very good at them. And I understand the moment, right? But you're making it something huge.
Sure.
What emotion are you going to feel? You're going to feel the pressure. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel maybe worried or feel doubt. So how does that impact you behaviorally? I mean, what I see from athletes is that's when they'll rush. Yeah. Right? They might not even realize it, but their pace is quickened so much. It's almost like they just want to get it over with.
Yep. And let's go back to something you said there too. The moment is big. The task isn't.
Right. It
isn't big at all. There's no telling how many free throws this guy has shot over the course of his career.
Right.
I mean, he was. I'm not a Virginia basketball fan. I've not followed them, but I guess reading about this a little bit after the fact, he was a prolific shooter and scorer coming out of high school. And obviously, you don't become a first-team All-ACC player if you can't shoot the basketball pretty effectively. So again, it's really important to differentiate between the moment versus the task. And of course, we want to be significantly more focused on the task at hand.
Right.
And so that process we just kind of went through right there is what we call, we need to narrow and simplify. Narrow and simplify. And all that means is let's take what feels or could be really big in our minds and make it small. Let's go from big to small. And so one of the ways we do that is we dial in on routine and process. Routine and process. And so, Cory, what do you teach related to how we let routine drive quieting the mind?
Well, I think you did a good job of describing this earlier. Now, instead of focusing on the shot, right, or the outcome of the shot, all I have to do is focus on the routine and focus on the next right thing. And because I've grooved this routine and I have this process and I've done this, over the course of one season, probably hundreds or thousands of times.
For sure.
I know that if I just direct my mind to that, right?
Yep. Simple, narrow.
Exactly. That I'm getting myself ready for the shot.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It takes our focus from outcome. It puts it on process. And now in my mind, it's almost like I'm just checking off boxes, so to speak, of what I need to do to be successful in this moment.
Yep.
Right. So there's comfort, there's confidence in routine and in process. And what I find from athletes who don't have routine or process to go to in pressure situations, you can literally see the like searching kind of feeling on their face and in their body language and what they do. It's like they don't know what to do. You know what I mean? So again, that's why I described, I think a lot of time you don't know what to do, so you just jump right back on the line. Like, you just give me the ball, right? Let's just get this over with. Baseball players, I see it a lot. They don't have a process. They don't have a routine. They step out of the box like, okay, I think I should be doing something here, but I don't know what it is. So let me just jump right back in.
Right.
All eager, anxious for the next one.
Right. And so in that situation, yes, it's a highly pressure-packed situation. But if we've rehearsed routine and we have a blueprint, what you're describing is like, I have a blueprint.
Right.
Like, I know what I do when I get into situations that are creating pressure. We just dial into that, we engage in that, and go.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting. They interviewed him after the game, and it was a really interesting comment. He said, I was terrified up there. But here's how I interpreted that. When you have a good routine and you know how to narrow down and make it small, I can be like conscious of and mindful of the weight and magnitude of this whole thing, and yet fully committed to my process.
Absolutely.
And so I can be, in a sense, terrified, and yet focused on what's right in front of me.
Yeah, and know in the back of my mind, as long as I'm engaging in this process, I'm kind of right where I need to be.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm the only place I can be.
I'm right where I want to be almost.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Okay, so quieting the mind is hugely important, because what do we know? Pressure situations drive the mind. I mean, the mind becomes overly active in that situation. Also, and kind of a final point we want to get to here, quieting the body. And you talked earlier, and I think in fantastic detail, about some of the systems, what we call those internal barometers that dial up inside of us. We've all had this experience. And it could be for a test. It could be for a presentation you've got to go give. Public speaking does this to people like crazy, where heart rate, respiration, body temperature, up, right? Our hands start to sweat, nausea in the stomach. It's all the ways our body is telling us, hey, guess what? Then what you're thinking about, what you're about to go and do, something's at stake here. Right? Our body is sending off alarms. And so what do we do with that?
To me, the skill that I've been teaching for years that I believe in the most and think is the most helpful, and I've gotten so much positive feedback on, is really learning how to breathe, to kind of center yourself in that moment. And it sounds so simple, right? Like, we went to school for a long time, and for me to come out and say, hey, the most important thing I learned is how to teach an athlete how to breathe, like, it almost seems crazy. But to me, if you can control your breath, you can control the situation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's the easiest example for me when I'm watching some of the athletes that I work with. Like, if I can see them consciously taking a breath and trying to slow the game down, I know that person's in control of him or herself, and I'll put my money on them.
Yeah.
In most cases, as long as they're doing that, right? And so this is something that you can try for yourself at home, and just, really just consciously take one good inhale and one good exhale and a deep breath. And when you do that, what you'll notice is that your mind might be going a mile a minute, but if you really just try to slow things down and take a good solid breath, right? Like, actually feel the inhale, your stomach rising, feel the exhale, your stomach collapsing, you'll notice that it almost clears your mind.
Yeah.
Right? And so in that moment, I could be thinking a million things, but if I can have enough awareness to, okay, let me just pause and focus on my breath, I take it to one. Right, so it's going to clear our head. Secondly, is obviously the direct impact. There's a relationship between your respiration and your heart rate. Most people don't know that, but if you can slow and control your breathing, you can slow and control your heart rate.
Yep.
That we've got some biofeedback technology here in the office. I can actually show you how, when you get your respiration set in a particular rhythm, your heart rate will match it.
Yep.
Right. That's amazing power. You know what I mean? Like, that's in your hands to control the moment, is your ability to just control your breath. And then the last thing that I'll add, okay, so we're clearing our head, we're calming our body, is it's going to put us right into the present moment, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm focusing on my breath, the breath is happening now. It's not happening in the future. It's happening now. That's a pretty powerful combination there. Clear my head, calm my body, put me in the present moment, right? Now I can really direct myself to thinking clearly, right? Now I can focus on my process or my routine, and I'm right where I want to be.
Sure. And what I really like about what you described there too is it's breathing gives us an actionable.
Yes.
I mean, so many people who are in performance situations, the big question we hear, like, what do I do? Mm-hmm. What can I actively do to help improve my focus, manage the pressure effectively? Here's an actionable that you can act. You want something to do this.
Right. And
you can also, we get feedback, right? And so you can, if we get into a situation where maybe I'm 5 minutes before I'm going to go do something that's creating pressure for me, and I can feel heart rate picking up, and I'm sweating, whatever it might be, I can see measurable improvement when I begin to slow my breathing down and do some of that deep diaphragm breathing that we teach.
Right.
That's huge. Right. Like for me to have the peace of mind of seeing feedback of it's getting better, extremely helpful. Another thing I'd add is the word pace. When people begin to feel the effects of pressure and focus is beginning to get disrupted, everything goes faster. They walk faster, they talk faster, they move faster. What I always tell people is fast is bad unless we're running a foot race. It just is, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I'm trying to execute motor skills or I'm trying to communicate effectively in a pressure situation, if I'm going too fast, I'm hurting myself and the people around me.
Right.
Now, it's challenging to be able to have the awareness we need and the mindfulness we need related to pace, but that's where we can also help each other.
But, and again, this is why I mentioned before the specific note about the Alex Honnold thing and how he prepared for the emotional aspect of the climb, right? And so, again, I'm not encouraging people to breathe or to remember to breathe just in the big pressure-packed moment. Uh-huh. I'm encouraging them to practice that in practice, and practice that in every other moment in the game or in the match or whatever it might be, right? That's how you prepare for the big moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So now I can rely on something that's familiar and something that really is comfortable. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to do that for the first time in the moment when it comes, it's really hard to be comfortable and confident in it. Right?
Absolutely, it is. So. Yeah. No, it goes back to it's skill building.
Yeah.
Like we can't expect to try to execute a skill just when the pressure is on and be good at it.
Exactly.
We've got to build these skills consistently.
Right. So let's get just because it's baseball season, I work a lot with a lot of baseball players. Like let's say hitters, right? What I've really been trying to stress to them here recently is like, hey, if there's a bat in your hand, we need to start to pair together. Like if I'm holding this bat in my hand, then I'm relaxed, right?
Yeah,
like there's this deliberate process of when I pick up that bat, I start to slow my breathing down. Mm-hmm. And I might not have my bat for another 5 minutes, depending on what happens in the game and the guys ahead of me, but I'm ready for it now, right? I'm under control. So again, it could be practice. It could be the first game of the year, the first inning of the year where there's no pressure. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I'm still relaxed and I'm right where I want to be.
And so we associate bat in hand with composed, prepared, relaxed. So that's really good. Okay, so I know we need to kind of move toward closing up for today, but this is a fun topic because pressure. It runs through so many significant things that people have experienced in life. And of course, the burning question becomes, how do we create the greatest likelihood possible that it goes well? And focus is I would argue probably the most important variable associated with that. And so this has been a fun discussion for me. And we'll just, as we close up, again, our 3 points are the importance of preparation in order to achieve focus, and then also we've got to be able to quiet the mind and quiet the body if we want to be at our best when pressure's on. So Cory, as we finish, any final thoughts from you?
No, this was a lot of fun. This is a topic that I really enjoy. It's one that I've definitely prepared for. This was a lot of fun and stuff that I really, really enjoy teaching, and at the same time I try to practice for myself. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we're going to wrap up for today. It's really been enjoyable this month focus that we've had, and so we'll be back in about a week or so to return to another topic here. And as always, we appreciate you taking the time to listen to our podcast. Thanks very much.
If you're interested in learning more about what we do, visit our website at synergyperformancesc.com. Join us next time for more relevant topics on The Growth Project.